When I look at selection, selection is now after you've gotten your application forms and you've gone through them up until the point that you give a person the contract. This is exactly what I've said. So when you look at selection, and especially the selection process, make sure that you include things about the criteria, about the shortlisting, something about the interviews, and then offering a contract or giving the person a written. The selection process, I've picked the ones that I've underlined for you. First of all, get criteria. And this is where you say the person must have 2 years minimum experience. And then when you get the person's CV, you see 2 years experience. Okay, that person goes into the yes pile. And that is where we start to sort the CVs according to those criteria. Then I'm going to do some reference checks, maybe call up the previous employer, verify the person's CV to see is the CV and the qualifications actually quite real. Then I'm going to make a short list of the possible candidates and I'm going to invite those candidates for an interview. And then after the interview, the person that I like the most, I'm going to offer that person a contract. Then screening as part of the selection process. Guys, it is these steps where I go look at the person's CV against my assessment criteria. I'm going to do some shortlisting. I'm going to separate the sets of CVs according to yes and no. I'm going to do some background checks or reference checks. And then lastly, I'm going to shortlisting into yes and I definitely want you, and no, I'm going to notify you that your application was unsuccessful. The purpose of the interview is to get more information about what is the strengths and weaknesses of each candidate. Some people look brilliant on their CVs, but when the person is sitting there in front of you, you realize that person is not going to be able to function properly at your workplace. It helps the employer to make a final decision about who is the most suitable candidate, because he might have 4 or 5 CVs that are quite brilliant and then they can match that person in real life to the CV. And then it can also create an opportunity where information about the business and the applicant is exchanged. So that can also convince the applicant. Maybe you've got a brilliant applicant, but they don't not sure yet whether they want to work for you, and that can convince them to actually come and work. The role of the interviewer before and during the interview. This is usually some of the worst answered questions if it comes across in the papers because you don't read. Read carefully. Are they asking interviewer before or during? Very rarely do they ask both in the same question. They will specify before, and that is when you prepare, or during, and that is when the person is actually there for the interview. Now, the interviewer is the human resources manager. Before, they need to go set up questions that they can ask every candidate. They need to go prepare a venue where this is going to take place. They need to invite the candidates for the interview. They need to inform them when is it going to take place, what is the date, and then also they need to go check those 4 or 5 CVs that they like the most. Go read it so that when the candidate is sitting there, they can also ask some specific questions. During, that is when the person is sitting in front of you. And that is where you have to allocate the same amount of time for each person. So if the first person had 15 minutes, second person, same amount of time. Make the interviewee feel at ease. Don't ask questions that is discriminating. Also, give the interview a chance to ask questions and close the interview by thanking the person for attending, making the effort to actually come. For the applicant, you will only get the question that says during the interview. What are their role? Greet the interviewer, the human resources department, by name or give them a handshake, give them a smile. And make eye contact. Sit up straight, have a good body language. Listen carefully to the question and then respond. Ask questions. If you're not sure of something, ask questions. If you have made mistakes in the past, be honest about them and explain how you have dealt with them or corrected them. Know your own strengths and weaknesses so that you can discuss that in the interview.